Whoa, it spoke to me.
That's new.
I am slightly concerned. I don't know what's about to happen now, folks. That's I've never heard that before. All right, well, let's we're gonna see what happens and go from there. Okay, I wish learn something new every day. All right, so today we're going to talk a little bit about overcoming failure. And the basis of this, there's a quote from Alfred E. Neuman that I had read one time. Well, let me back up. There's an old quote that says, if at first you don't succeed, try again, right? And Alfred E. Neuman says, if at first you don't succeed, you're about normal. Okay, it's a pretty normal thing to not succeed right off the bat, to not be a super duper rich person right off the bat. You're more than likely going to fail at the beginning. If at first you don't succeed, you're about normal. But sometimes we don't feel that way. Sometimes if we don't hit a home run our very first at bat, we feel like we're failing. Sometimes we think, gosh, I've been in this for a year and I'm not reaching my goals. I've been doing this for 4 or 5 years. I'm not reaching my goals. I'm not progressing. I'm failing at this, okay? Whatever that may be. So we run into this all the time. And then we also think, we look at all these other successful people, whether it be in our business or just other people in general, and we think, gosh, I mean, they've got it all figured out. You know, they're making all this money. They're closing deals. They're doing all these other different things. They're a success in whatever aspect they're doing in life. And we feel that that just happened. That, you know, Bill Gates just woke up one day and 1 hour later, he invented Microsoft and he's been, you know, the richest man in the world ever since. You know, we think that's how it all worked. We think in real estate, we look at a Bernie Gallerini and we think, well, yeah, the guy's been a millionaire since day one. Excuse me. And yet Bernie Gallerini will tell you that his first year, it would take him 600-700 contacts to get a listing. And now, you know, we don't think about that now because he's Bernie Gallerini. You know, we have example after example, but we look at some of these people and we think, gosh, I mean, it's just natural to them, okay? Athletes and all these other different things. So the point of today is we're going to have a little bit of, I don't know, might be fun, might not be. I have no idea. We're going to test this out. And we're going to see a little bit of some success stories and how they might not be as quick to success as we think. And then we're going to get into, I wrote down a list of ideas on how to overcome that initial failure and keep going. So I'm going to share my screen here and we're going to go ahead and do this. Okay. So can everybody see my screen? It says #relentless.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. So I put together this little game here. Okay. If at first you don't succeed, you're about normal. So you can either shout out the answer or you can put the number in the chat box. But let's have a little fun here. Let's play a little game. So I wrote this down here. This person was fired from the Kansas City Star because his editor said he lacked imagination and had no good ideas. Was that Walt Disney, Steve Jobs, Johnny Carson, or George Lucas? You can either put in the chat box the number you think that corresponds to. You can shout it out.
Disney.
Okay,
Yes.
so we got the Disney in there. What do we have in the chat box? I got some Disneys in there. Okay. The answer is actually Walt Disney. So Walt Disney, his editor said he had no good ideas and no imagination. Imagine that, Walt Disney. No imagination, no good ideas. He actually failed at several other businesses before he created Snow White, and then that premiere went just totally off the charts. You know, today we would call it viral. And then he went on to become the guy who redefined American childhood with all the Disney films and the Disney parks and things like that, but was fired from his job at the newspaper because he lacked imagination and had no good ideas. How's that? All right, second one here. This person was publicly fired from their first television job as an anchor in Baltimore for getting too emotionally invested in her stories. Was that Barbara Walters, Connie Chung, Oprah Winfrey, or Katie Couric?
Oprah.
Oprah Winfrey.
I hear a lot of Oprahs. I see Tiffany putting a 3 in the box there for Oprah. The correct answer is, as a matter of fact, Oprah Winfrey. She then rebounded from that, became the queen of television talk shows before amassing a media empire, and today she's worth about $3 billion according to Forbes, but was fired publicly from her first job because she was too invested in her stories. She had too much passion, too much energy, and they fired her. They got rid of her. And obviously we know what she's become since, $3 billion, everything's based around Oprah. Okay, so there's Oprah, failed first time through. This person was rejected by the USC School of Cinematic Arts multiple times. Was it Viola Davis, Steven Spielberg, Denzel Washington, or Meryl Streep? USC is the University of Southern California, rejected by their School of Cinematic Arts multiple times.
Mr. Steven.
I see a Denzel, Spielberg, I heard. Any other guesses? Meryl Streep. Spielberg, another one. All right. Let's see what the answer is here. It is Steven Spielberg. Went on to create then the first summer blockbuster with Jaws. He's won 3 Academy Awards, 4 Emmys, 7 daytime Emmys, and his 27 movies have grossed more than $9 billion. And yet, we think of Steven Spielberg, right? This great director, cinematic guy, and the University of Southern California Cinematic School rejected him multiple times. So imagine if he had just given up on that, we wouldn't have all these wonderful things that Steven Spielberg had created. Isn't that amazing? I mean, how do you reject Steven Spielberg multiple times? It's like, that is just mind-blowing to me. All right, here we go. This person was ostracized by his country's top business people for his unique vision. Was that Soichiro Honda, Henry Ford, Enzo Ferrari, Kiichiro Toyota? Which one of these was ostracized by his country's business people?
Henry Ford.
We got Ford. Who else we got? We got a Ferrari in the chat box. And Toyota is spelled correctly. His name is spelled that way. But I know the company is now Toyota, but that's how you spell his name. Ford, Toyota. Okay. Well, actually, the answer is Soichiro Honda.
Oh.
He was a mechanical genius, idolized Edison, and rebelled against the norm. His passion for aggressive individualism was more of a fit for the US, and he found himself alienated from Japanese businessmen who valued teamwork above all else. He then challenged the American automotive industry in the 1970s and led a Japanese automotive revolution. So we think Honda, yeah, Japanese car maker, this and that. The Japanese businessmen wanted nothing to do with him. They didn't like his style. They didn't like his ideas. He had to essentially become a massive person in America before Japan accepted him. And then obviously there's many, many more car dealerships that became in Japan. But ultimately in Japan himself, it didn't work. They didn't want to deal with him. They just thought his visions were too unique. And here he is, one of the biggest car makers in history. Pretty wild stuff. All right, let's go here. This person was supposed to take over the family farm, but failed miserably as a farmer, so they went back to school. Albert Einstein, Teddy Roosevelt, George Washington, Sir Isaac Newton, who was supposed to be a farmer, but failed and ended up going back to school. Who you got? Who do we think?
Roosevelt?
Roosevelt, okay. We got Roosevelt. I got another Roosevelt in the chat.
Roosevelt.
We got another Roosevelt. Okay. All right. Well, the correct answer is Sir Isaac Newton. So Sir Isaac Newton was supposed to be a farmer. His mom realized he was not meant to be a farmer, so she let him go back to finish his basic education. And then eventually she allowed him to go to Cambridge University, where now, the rest is history. He's one of the all-time great scientists, revolutionizing physics, mathematics, so on and so forth, right? Newton's law of physics and all these other different things. But he was supposed to be a farmer. That was the family business. They actually took him out of school to work on the family farm, and he was supposed to go to a family farm and failed so miserably as a farmer that they let him go back to school just to finish his basic education. And it obviously went on and on from there. All right. When this person first auditioned for the American Negro Theater, they flubbed their lines and spoke in a heavy Caribbean accent, which made the director angrily tell them to stop wasting his time and go get a job as a dishwasher. Is that Sidney Poitier, Idris Elba, James Earl Jones, or Harry Belafonte? What do we got? Any guesses?
Sidney Poitier.
Sidney Poitier, okay. Anyone else? Agree?
Harry Belafonte.
Harry Belafonte, okay. Anyone else? The correct answer is Sidney Poitier, who then worked on his craft, became a hugely successful Hollywood star, won an Academy Award for Best Actor, and helped break down the color barrier in the American film industry. But imagine that. For those of you that know movie history, Sidney Poitier is a pretty big deal. And initially, on his first audition, they told him to go be a dishwasher. They said, stop being an actor, go be a dishwasher. You're never going to make it. Right? I mean, how bad must he have been initially for them to say, because if he was just a little bit bad, they'd have said, hey, you know, go work on this, you'll be bad. He was so bad, they said, just go be a dishwasher. That's pretty bad. And yet he just kept going, kept pushing. And, you know, again, as they say, the rest is history. Pretty wild stuff. All right. This person was once a divorced, homeless, single parent living off welfare. Is that J.K. Rowling, Stephen King, John Grisham, Dan Brown? Who do you got? Who do you think?
J.K. Rowling.
J.K. Rowling. Okay. Anyone agree, disagree, want to take a shot at it? Okay. Anyone else? Oh, I see a Stephen King came to me in the chat box.
I'd say Stephen King.
Stephen King. Okay.
I'm guessing.
Yeah. Well, that's a lot of these are just guesses. When I was reading some of this stuff, I was going with it too. All right.
Rawlings.
Yeah. The correct answer is J.K. Rowling, who is now internationally renowned for her 7-book Harry Potter series and became the first billionaire author in 2004. But here's a woman who was homeless, divorced, single parent, living on welfare. And then that's when she started writing Harry Potter. And again, now she's a billionaire. And I mean, the story goes on beyond that. Harry Potter initially was rejected by, I think the number was 7. 7 publishers rejected her first thing of Harry Potter before someone took it on. Can you imagine being one of those 7 people? No, this isn't going to be any good. Oh, I'll bet those 7 people are probably don't have their job anymore. But I mean, so talk about being down in the dumps, right? Homeless, divorced, single parent, living off welfare. And there you go. Now a billionaire. All right. Last one. And then we'll get to the other stuff. This person's teachers told him he was too stupid to learn anything. This person's teachers told him he was too stupid to learn anything. Alexander Graham Bell, Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Edison, Alexander Hamilton.
Thomas Edison.
So we got a Thomas Edison. We got a few Thomas Edisons.
Thomas Edison.
Thomas Edison.
I'd say Edison.
Yeah. Well, you all would be right. It is Thomas Edison. And even after that, he still didn't do it very well. He was actually fired from his first 2 jobs for not being very productive. And then he obviously went on to invent the light bulb, 1,000 other patents, and invented it, which is a new word, invented some world-changing devices like the phonograph, the lamp, the movie camera, all that stuff. But they said he was too stupid to learn anything. That's okay. First of all, it's pretty wild to think of Thomas Edison. That's pretty harsh for a teacher to say that. That would never fly today. That would, I mean, this is a long time ago where you could say things like that. Could you imagine somebody today, a teacher telling a kid today, you're too stupid to learn anything? Man, that would be all over the news. And here's a great quote by Thomas Edison. Many of life's failures are people who did not realize how close they were to success when they gave up. So talk about that. He's got another good one. They asked him, a reporter asked him, about failing 1,000 times before I invented the light bulb. He said, I didn't fail. I just found 999 ways it didn't work. So that's just a good mentality to have there.
Actually, Thomas Edison's mom made him genius
Yeah.
because his teacher tell him to bring at home the letter to his mom, only give to his mom. He gave his mom was crying after reading the letter, and Thomas Edison asked his mom, what is that? What is written on the letter? The mother said, son, the school said you're too smart. The school is not fit for you. You need to be homeschooled. So his mother gave him the environment to become a genius.
That's pretty amazing. That's a good story. So, so the point of all this, little stuff that
Thomas Edison found this note in her mother's drawer when his mother passed away. That letter from the school saying, your son is too stupid, cannot learn, please remove him from our school.
Pretty amazing. Pretty amazing when you think about that, with a guy that again invented the light bulb. So look, I mean, those are just a few of the examples. There's more and more of those. I mean, there's, the Beatles were rejected by 4 record labels before they got signed. The Beatles were rejected by 4 record labels before they got signed. I mean, we obviously know some of the famous ones, Michael Jordan, the first time he tried out for varsity basketball, they cut him, told him to go play junior varsity. The story goes on, but I just wanted to share a few of those. Star Wars, George Lucas. I'll tell you what, we'll do this in another class. One of the greatest business stories of all time is George Lucas with Star Wars. And we'll talk about that another time. But the synopsis of this, George Lucas created Star Wars. The 3 biggest production companies at the time rejected it, said this is never going to work, this is stupid, this is no good. He went to the 4th company. They said they would do it, but they weren't very supportive of it. So he finagled the deal to where, okay, I'll help put up some of my own money, I'll get loans to get some of my own money, but I get 100% of all the 100% of all the rights to Star Wars. And the company's like, yeah, sure, whatever, kid. If we make $1 on this film, it'll be great. Do you know how much merchandise Star Wars has sold in the last 50 years that all goes to George Lucas? I mean, that was one of the greatest business moves of all time. But anyways, but look, the point of all this is, we think of some of these people, we think of Thomas Edison being this genius, and yet people initially in school said he was too stupid to learn anything. We see Oprah as this massive success. I mean, it's Oprah. She's everywhere. She's got the books, the movies, her own TV channel, obviously the talk show. And, when she was first an anchor, she got fired from her first job. Disney, no imagination is what his editor told him. And no good ideas. So we see these people that we think about, and they had to go through those failures before they got to be who they are. So sometimes for us, whether you're brand new in the business and you're not getting there, or maybe you've been in the business for a while, but you've either hit a slump or you're not progressing at the way that you think you should be progressing, we get in our head sometimes that, man, we're failing. I'm failing at this. I don't know if I can do this. And yet it's that ability to keep going that helps you get there. So now that we've gotten past this, I wrote down a number of thoughts of overcoming that fear, that feeling of failure, overcoming that thought that I'm failing at this. I can't do this. What am I going to do? How do I get out of this? Should I do something else? Things along those lines. So I wrote down a number of thoughts here. These are in no particular order of importance. They're just some general thoughts that I wrote down here. Okay. The first thing I wrote down here, okay. Remember this, that the higher the chance of failure, the higher the reward upon success. The higher the chance of failure, the higher the reward upon success. So you have to remind yourself constantly that, yes, this is hard. And yes, maybe I'm not getting where I want to go, but also remind yourself that, boy, if I get this, the reward is higher. Because remember, in our business, when it comes to prospecting, the path of least rejection gets you the least profit. So, give you an example. Mailing postcards is a very low rejection prospecting method, because people are not going to call you and say, stop mailing me your postcard. This is stupid. They're going to reject you, but you're not going to know about it because they're just going to throw the postcard away. Okay. But you have a very low rate of return off of postcards. And then you have the profit margins because of the amount of money you're spending on postcards. Whereas dialing people on the phone has a very high level of rejection because you're getting hung up on. You are getting people saying, don't call here anymore. You're getting people that are angry, but yet you have a higher chance of succeeding if you can break through by doing it that particular way. And your profit margins are higher because you're not paying much to get the phone numbers, dialer, things along those lines. So you have to remember that the higher the chance of failure, the higher the reward upon success. I wrote down here, when you take the path of least resistance, you're always going to fail and never achieve the goals you've set. So as a reminder to yourself, if you're failing and it's like, oh, there's got to be an easier way. If you take the path of least resistance, you're always going to fail and never achieve the goals you've set. Okay. So you just have to remind yourself, I have to keep pushing. I have to keep fighting through this failure, because at the end of this failure is when we get to the gold. Okay. But if I don't get past this failure and I go path of least resistance, I'm never going to get there. I may move forward a step, but that's all I'm going to go. I wrote down here, to keep moving forward quickly, we have to understand that rejection and failure are part of the process and you can't let them stop you. To keep moving forward quickly, we have to understand that rejection and failure are part of the process and you can't let them stop you, because if you do, then rejection and failure wins and you don't. So when you're going through that feeling of failure, go, God, another no, another no, another no. You have to understand that this is just part of the process. This is the Bernie Gallerini that, his first couple years, it took him 700 contacts to get a listing. This is Curtis Ware saying that for the first 18 months he had a license. He had no idea what the hell he was doing. He didn't even take a listing. We have people after people with these type of examples. This is just part of the process. But if you let the fear and rejection win, then you won't. So on that thought, okay, 3 points underneath that. The first point I put underneath that is succeeding is going from failure to failure with enthusiasm. Succeeding is going from failure to failure with enthusiasm. Failure and rejection is part of the process, but that's what success is. That's a Winston Churchill quote. Going from failure to failure with enthusiasm. Excuse me. I wrote down here, never accepting no when a yes is still available. So meaning that, okay, you feel like you're failing, but think about this. Are you failing or are you giving up too soon? There's a difference. You might be failing, or maybe you're not failing, you're just giving up too soon, and you're realizing that there's still a yes potentially available, but you're just accepting a no. I wrote down here number 3 is this was Mike Ferry talked about this. He asked, I think it was Karen Bernardi. He asked, how do you become great? And they answered, learn to fail. Learn to fail. That's how you become great. And we'll talk a little bit more about that here coming up. But what I wrote down here, when I go back to the failing part of it, never accept no when a yes is still available, because sometimes, again, there's a difference between failing and giving up too soon. So an example of that is, well, I'm failing. I can't find any business. Okay, great. And you go through the script and you might say, so I'm curious, who do you know that might be looking to buy or sell? I don't know of anyone. Okay, well, I appreciate your time. Have a great day. Well, you're not failing. You just gave up too easy, because There's so many different ways to find a yes in a transaction. I wrote this down to make sure that you're not giving up too soon. They should hang up on you before you should hang up on them. So write down a list of questions that you can ask to keep the conversation going. Give you an example. So when do you plan on moving? Well, we're not selling this house. Okay, great. Well, have you thought about buying an investment property, while the rates are still low? No, we're not interested in buying an investment property. Okay, great. Do you have any other properties, any investment properties, second home, any family homes that you might be looking to buy or sell, or might be looking to sell? No, we don't have any of those. Okay, great. Well, I'm curious, who do you know that might be looking to buy or sell a house? Well, I don't know of anyone. Okay, great. I understand that. Well, do you know anyone that might be thinking about investing in real estate? I mean, actually, maybe even out of state, because there's a lot of people that are buying investment properties out of state. Do you know anyone that might be interested in that? No, I don't know anyone that might be interested in that. Okay, great. Do you know anyone who's renting right now that might be looking to take advantage of these low rates and these great programs, might be looking to buy? No, I don't know of anyone those lines. But the point is, I've got so many questions I can keep going to try to find a yes. There's a difference between failing and giving up too soon. Worst case scenario, my last ditch effort is to say, hey, one of the things I do with a lot of people in your neighborhood is keep them updated every couple months of what's going on in the market, even if they're not looking to buy or sell. Would you mind if I did the same for you? Yeah, sure. Great. Okay. Is this your best number? Don't take no when a yes is still available, but that a yes still available doesn't mean specifically just if they're looking to sell. So many different ways to keep the conversation going. Okay. The difference between failure and giving up too soon. Okay. I wrote down here, this is a great lesson here from Brian Tracy about failure. Okay. How do you overcome failure? How do you shift your mindset from failure? He says, if you're in sales, change the way you talk to yourself by viewing yourself as a rejection specialist rather than a sales specialist. If you're in sales, change the way you talk to yourself by viewing yourself as a rejection specialist rather than a sales specialist. If you define yourself as a sales specialist, you'll be setting yourself up for failure, disappointment, and lowered self-esteem with every rejection you get. But on the other hand, if you look upon yourself as a rejection specialist, you'll be setting yourself up to feel like a winner every time someone turns you down for any reason. You can look upon every rejection as a percentage of a sale. So I'm going to read that again to kind of let this sink in, because this is a really, really great mindset shift on dealing with failure that we have to get. If you're in sales, change the way you talk to yourself by viewing yourself as a rejection specialist rather than a sales specialist. If you define yourself as a sales specialist, you'll be setting yourself up for failure, disappointment, and lowered self-esteem with every rejection you get. But on the other hand, if you look upon yourself as a rejection specialist, you'll be setting yourself up to feel like a winner every time someone turns you down for any reason. You could look upon every rejection as a percentage of a sale. So, continues to say, if it takes you 20 calls to make a sale, you can look upon a rejection as 5% of the commission that you receive for making that call. So if it takes you 20 calls to make a sale, you can look upon a rejection as 5% of the commission that you'll receive for making that call. So you could look at it from that perspective. If you know your numbers and you know that it takes you a certain number of calls to get a lead, a certain number of calls to get a deal, a certain number of calls to get an escrow, a listing, whatever the case may be, you can look as the rejection of, all right, well, that rejection was 5% of my commission. That rejection was 1% of my commission. Well, it's going to take me this many contacts to make $10,000. So that rejection was worth $50. You have to look at it from that perspective to help yourself with this daily failure of prospecting, because we get told no so many times, we feel like we're failing because we're looking at ourselves as sales specialist, sales expert. I'm a real estate expert. Okay. instead of I'm a rejection specialist. In this way, every person you speak to actually pays you money. You simply collect it when you make the sale. That is inevitable when you speak to enough people. You simply collect it when you make the sale. That is inevitable when you speak to enough people. And every time someone turns you down, you're a winner. You're just that much farther ahead. It's such a great mindset shift when we're dealing with failure in our profession, specifically because we're getting rejected so many times on a daily basis. We have to look at each rejection as a percentage of our sale, and we're going to collect once we speak to enough people and we find that sale. Okay, you're just a little bit closer to the sale that must come if you keep on keeping on. You're just a little bit closer to the sale that must come if you keep on keeping on. Use every setback or disappointment as a spur to greater effort. Decide that nothing will ever get you down. Decide that you will bounce back instead of break. Develop a resilient or hardy personality. So it's just a simple mindset shift in dealing with failure, is that instead of a sales specialist, you're a rejection specialist. And you're looking at each rejection as, if I know my numbers, and I know it's going to take me this many contacts, this many calls to get a lead or a deal or whatever the case may be, then this rejection is just a percentage of my commission. And I'm going to collect on that, because it's the mindset shift as well to say, I will collect on that. Because you can't just say, well, that's why, let me back up. That's why I hate the line that says every no gets me closer to a yes. Bunch of crap. Every no does not get you closer to a yes unless you work on your pitch. But if you think of it from this other shift is, God, this is a percentage of my commission. I know my numbers. I know I'm going to get it. I just got to keep on keeping on. I just have to keep pushing. It's such a great, great mentality. It reminds me of when Bernie Gallerini was on here, and he says he didn't want to be called a real estate agent because most real estate agents are unproductive people. He wants to be called a professional telemarketer. He just happens to have a real estate license. So it's just a different way of looking at things. Okay, so you just have to do things from that perspective. Okay, I wrote down here a few other ways on overcoming that initial failure. I wrote down here, acknowledge that you failed and your role in the failure. You have to be honest with yourself. If you're failing, you have to accept some responsibility. You have to accept some accountability. Acknowledge that you're failing and what your role is in the failure. Yeah, that can be hurtful. That can damage the ego. Absolutely. Because we're trying to come up with alternative reasons. Oh, it's the marketplace. It's my market. I don't have this database. I don't speak this language. I don't do all these other things. We have to acknowledge that we failed in our role in the failure. We have to accept some accountability. If you can't accept your role in the failure and you can't accept some accountability, it's going to be very, very hard to overcome that failure to convert into success. But if you look in the mirror and take the accountability for it, then you're on the right path. Okay. I wrote down here after that, analyze the reasons that are making you fail. Okay. Analyze the reasons that are making you fail. Is it because you can't overcome a certain objection? Is it because you're not talking to enough people? Is it because you don't know the scripts as good as you do, or as you should? Is it because you get too nervous when you're talking to a client and you say constantly? Is it because you talk too fast? Is it because you talk too slow? Is it because you don't have any energy? You're not excited? Is it because you're not providing enough value to them? Specify the reasons that are making you fail. And if we're honest with ourselves, we can identify the reason. Some of you do a good job of this. Some of you have the same problem of why you're not succeeding at the way you want, because you can't handle a certain objection. I mean, we have a couple of you that if the client says, I want to think about it, you're toast. This has been a very, very obvious thing to me recently. Well, I want to think about it, and you're done. Instead of just, hey, great. Since 3 minds are better than 2, let's think out loud together. Tell me, what are you thinking about? I mean, there's a script for that written out, capitalized where it's supposed to be capitalized, the whole thing. But if we, but a lot of you can't overcome that. A lot of you, when it comes to the commission, well, the other agent was only going to charge me this. You freeze. Okay. Well, what do you do to get homes sold and you don't have a plan of action written out? So identify the reasons that are making you fail. There's a reason. And if you don't look at, don't take this the wrong way, but if you feel like you're failing and you can't identify it, you can't figure it out, I'll be more than happy to tell you. And I'm not saying that in a sarcastic, in a, whatever type of way. My job as a coach is to tell you things that sometimes you don't want to hear. So I would, record some prospecting calls and send it to me. Record a listing presentation or like a live listing presentation. Analyze the reasons that make you fail. Okay. But I wrote down here under that as well, is that when you fail, figure out why you're failing before you continue to do it. So I'll give you an example. I am a big proponent that if you go on a listing presentation or you're working with a buyer or you have something that comes up and you couldn't overcome it, you didn't know how to handle it, that you call myself, James, Neil, somebody immediately to see if we can help you come up with an answer. Because if you don't, then you're like, oh, well, my coaching call with Robert is on Thursday. I'll ask him then. Okay. Well, now you don't ask me until Thursday, but then it comes up again on Tuesday and it comes up again on Wednesday. So now instead of handling and calling me on Monday, where we could have figured out the situation and you could have got the deal Tuesday and Wednesday, you've now lost 3 deals. And then you call me Thursday and say, hey, I had this come up 3 times. How should I overcome it? Why didn't you call me after the first one? Why'd you lose 3 times instead of once? Identify the failure. Don't just fail and then, okay, right back at it. Figure it out. Figure it out. Okay. I wrote down here to overcoming failure to keep going. Have your business plan and goals with you at all times. Have your business plan and goals with you at all times. If you don't keep the target in front of you, the failure will grow and you won't be able to control it in your mind anymore. If you don't have your goals and business plan in front of you at all times, your failure will grow and it'll overtake your mindset. You will not be able to overcome it. But if you can fail and then look at that business plan, look at that goals and say, I've got to keep going, you will go. The best way to overcome failure is to keep trying, is to keep going. That's why Neil mentioned this last week, and you hear this from a lot of people, is that your last call of the day or your last door of the day, whatever the case would be, should be a positive experience. Because if you don't, let's say it's 5 o'clock and you make a call and they say, don't call here anymore, and they hang up the phone and then you end your day, you're not going to prospect again and say till 9 o'clock the next morning. Okay, that's 16 hours that go by. With the last thing lingering in your head is someone yelling at you and hanging up. It just grows and grows and grows and grows. And then by 9 o'clock the next morning, you're like hesitating to call. So you have to make sure that you're getting that negativity out of there on that last call of the day, last door of the day, and then making sure you're having your business plan, your goals in front of you to keep going, keep taking action. That's the way that you overcome failure, is by keep going. But if you don't have your goals and business plan in front of you, it's harder to do that. So make sure you always have those. I wrote down here, when you're overcoming failure, acknowledge what you've achieved. Acknowledge the wins that you've had. Yeah, you're failing right now. You've had a crappy day. Everyone's telling you no. People are hanging up on you. Okay, how do I overcome this? How do I get over this failure? Well, what have you done good? We talk about making a wins journal all the time. What have you done good? Well, I haven't had anything good this week. Okay, what about last week? Well, I got a really good lead. Okay. How'd you get it? What'd you do? Tell me about it. I submitted an offer for a buyer. We didn't get it accepted, but we were right there. Okay, good. You got a buyer lead. That's a win. You learned the scripts. That was a win. You recorded your listing presentation. You've had some successes. You've closed some deals in the past. Maybe you've only closed one deal in the past. Maybe you partnered on a deal. What are the good things you've achieved so far? Because you have to remind yourself more than ever when you're in that mindset of overcoming failure that you can do it. And if you've had some wins along the line, you can go to those to remind yourself that I can do this. Let's keep marching forward. Let's keep going. So you have to acknowledge all the good stuff that you've done so far, all the positive things that you've had. Okay. On that note, acknowledge what obstacles you've overcome to get here, to even this point. Some of you maybe, I've had this conversation with one of our agents before, every time that they feel like they're failing. And this is a woman who came to America as an immigrant and was a single mom who raised 3 kids. And I would go to her, I say, you're an immigrant, single mom, raised three kids, and you think prospecting is hard? That's a good point, Robert. Okay. I mean, come on. Let's be real here. You've got some real obstacles that you've overcome. Learning this script is not that difficult. You should, I mean, this should be an easy peasy for you. Acknowledge the obstacles you've overcome, the fears you've overcome. For some of you, I got to tell you, there are a few of you recently have taken on this open mic challenge, not challenge, I guess, but done open mic that you've never done before. That's a huge obstacle to overcome. That's a huge fear. It's huge. Being on Zoom is huge. Learning those different things. Okay. Acknowledge the fears and obstacles you've overcome. You've all done good things. You've all have positive things. You have to remind yourself of that in this business. Okay. But I wrote down here in overcoming failure, learn why you failed, acknowledge it, and then figure out how do I get better. Turn every failure into an opportunity to succeed. Why didn't I get that listing? Why didn't I get the offer accepted? Why? Okay, let's analyze it. Let's figure it out. Don't just say, oh God, I missed another one. I'm never going to get this. I'm never going to figure it out. Well, yeah, with that attitude, you're right. But let's figure out why. Why didn't you get it? And then work on getting better. That's how you overcome it. I wrote down here, acknowledge that no failure will finish you. Failure is just a part of the gig. Remember, it's just part of the process. Okay. It's part of the process. But no one failure is going to finish this. No one failure is going to end this for you. Okay. You've got to just keep going. But I wrote down here, last 2 points, and then we'll wrap up here. I wrote down here, in overcoming failure is look at things from a different angle. Sometimes to overcome failure, we have to look at things from a different angle, or as some people say, a 30,000-foot view. You're looking at it just from your angle as the real estate agent. Well, why don't you look at it from the angle maybe of a client? What if you just took it from a side angle? What if you just took out the real estate, pretended that you knew nothing about real estate, looked at the overall view of everything and said, now I see. Look at something from a different angle. Maybe you'll figure it out a different way. There's the old line of, put yourself in the other person's shoes. Sometimes looking at things from a different angle will help you figure out where the failure is coming from. And boy, I tell you, a switch will just go off. Okay. And then I wrote down here, last point I wrote down here, sometimes of overcoming failure is you might have to take a little bit of time away to just regroup, recharge. So the problem with failure in some cases is it burns us out. We just keep going and going and going. Oh, I'm gonna work my way through this. Sometimes you have to take that step back. Now, I'm not saying take a month off or, go on, they do this in the movies sometimes where the person,
Thanks, Robert.
The person just takes off their sports coat and goes, all right, I'm going on some little thing for hours or years. I'm going to go learn how to eat in Italy or something like that. Now that wouldn't be bad. Okay. But seriously, you don't have to take a bunch of time off, but sometimes, you got to take a day off. You got to take an hour off. You got to take an afternoon off to just regroup, get your mind right, recharge. Okay. And then come at it fresh. Because sometimes when we get into this thing of failure, it grows so big that we just lead to burnout and the energy's drained, emotionally drained. You might have to take a step back. Okay. But the main goal upon all this with overcoming the failure is, like we talked about with all these people, it's part of the process. And if you let it get to you, it's over. But if you say this is part of the process, let me figure out how I fix this and then keep going and keep grinding, then you're going to be just fine. Because remember, just like we talked about, Thomas Edison says, many of life's failures are people who did not realize how close they were to success when they gave up. Every single time you're going through failure, just know the light is just there. It's just around the corner. But you've just got to keep going, fix the pitch, fix the problem, keep going. And there's nothing that can stop you from overcoming that and being a massive, massive success. All right, everybody. That's all I got for the day. Hopefully there was one or two things in there that were interesting or helpful or something along that. But just know that it's part of the process. We just got to keep fighting every day.
Thank you, Robert. That was very